Cancel the meeting. What?
The pen was touching the paper. 12 investors, $1 million, and a contract 30 seconds from being signed, when Min-Jae Lee did something no one in that room had ever seen a CEO do. He stood up, pocketed his keys, and said 3 words that made the most powerful men in Seoul go completely silent. Cancel the meeting. And the reason why, standing alone in the rain 6 floors below, with a dead phone and no way home, had absolutely no idea she had just changed both their lives forever. The door swung open with a bang. Min-Jae Lee did not knock. He never knocked. When the CEO of Shintech Korea walked into a room, the room rearranged itself around him. The 12 investors seated around the glass table snapped to attention. Their pens hovered over contracts. Their suits cost more than most people made in a year. The chandelier above them scattered light like broken promises, and at the center of the table sat a deal worth exactly $1 million, crisp, clean, and ready to be signed. Min-Jae stood at the head of the table. His executive assistant placed a leather folder in front of him. The room smelled of expensive cologne and nervous anticipation. "Gentlemen." His voice was quiet. It always was. Quiet men with power never needed to raise their voice. "Thank you for your patience." The lead investor, a heavy-set man named Chairman Beck, spread his hands across the table. "We've been patient for 3 months, Min-Jae. Tonight we close this." Min-Jae opened the folder. His eyes moved across the first page. Then he paused. Something shifted behind his expression, so small, so brief, that only someone watching very carefully would have caught it. He closed the folder. He looked up at the security screen mounted discreetly on the wall behind Chairman Beck's head. In the tiny gray feed, he could see the lobby entrance. Rain was hammering the glass doors. And walking through it alone was a small figure in a soaked gray coat. He stared at that screen for exactly 4 seconds. Then he stood up. The room went still. Chairs did not scrape. Nobody breathed. "Cancel the meeting." Chairman Beck blinked. "I'm sorry. I said cancel the meeting." Min-Jae was already buttoning his jacket. "Reschedule for next Thursday. My office will send confirmation." The board members exchanged looks of pure panic. Director Choi, who had been Min-Jae's right hand for 6 years, rose halfway from his seat. "Min-Jae SSI, the contract is right there. The investors flew in from." "I know where they flew in from." He picked up his car keys from his jacket pocket. "Thursday." And he walked out. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now because this channel tells the kinds of stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Her name was Ada Okoye, and she had been standing in the rain for 11 minutes. She knew it was 11 minutes because she had been counting. It was the kind of thing you did when you were trying not to cry in public. You counted. You breathed. You reminded yourself that Seoul was not trying to punish you personally. It simply did not know you existed. Ada was 26 years old, born in Enugu, Nigeria, raised on ambition and her mother's jollof rice, and the unshakable belief that somewhere in the world there was a table she belonged at. She had earned a scholarship to study international business at Yonsei University. She had packed 2 suitcases, said goodbye to her family at the airport with dry eyes. She cried on the plane, where no one could see, and arrived in Seoul in February. When the wind cut through her like a blade and everyone around her moved with a practiced efficiency she hadn't yet learned to match. She had been an intern at Shintech for 4 months. Intern was generous. She made copies. She fetched coffee. She sat in the corner of the open plan office and watched senior analysts present ideas she had already thought of, and she kept her mouth shut because she was new, because she was foreign, because she had watched what happened to people who spoke too soon in rooms that weren't ready to hear them. But she was smart. God, she was smart, and she knew it, not with arrogance, but with the quiet certainty of someone who had been proving herself her entire life and was simply tired of having to start over every time she walked into a new room. She noticed the mistake in the presentation on a Tuesday. She hadn't been asked to review it. She was in the break room refilling paper in the printer when the slides flashed up on the shared drive, the investor deck for the Thursday meeting that had been moved up to Friday, now to tonight. Someone had made a critical error in the market projection data for Southeast Asia. They had confused GDP growth figures with per capita income. The numbers looked impressive. They were wrong. Ada stood in the break room for a long moment. She thought about saying nothing. It would have been easier. Let it fail. It wasn't her problem. She was an intern. She made copies. But the thing about Ada Okoye was that she could not leave a broken thing broken when she had the tools to fix it. She stayed. Everyone else left at 7, 8, 9. By 10 o'clock the office was empty except for the hum of the ventilation system and Ada at her desk, cross-referencing African and Asian market data, rebuilding the entire economic case from scratch using the research she had been quietly compiling for months, her own research, the work she did in the early mornings before anyone else arrived, the work she did because she believed, genuinely believed, that the connection between African emerging markets and Asian tech companies was one of the great untapped opportunities of the next decade. At 11:47, she saved the final version of the report, attached it to the shared drive, and shut down her computer. She gathered her bag. She stepped into the elevator. The lobby was empty. The security guard at the desk looked up, startled to see anyone coming down so late. "Working late?" he asked in Korean. "Just finishing something," she said. She walked out into the rain and immediately understood that she had miscalculated. The last bus had stopped running 20 minutes ago. The subway station 2 blocks away had a sign on its gate that she couldn't fully read, but the pulled-down shutter was clear enough. Her phone showed 4% battery. She opened the Maps app to find a taxi company, and the screen went black. She stood under the overhang for exactly 30 seconds, hoping the rain would ease. It did not ease. She started walking. Min-Jae had not gone back up to the boardroom. He'd stood at the security desk for a moment instead, his hand on the desk, watching the elevator display. "The intern," he said to the guard. "The one who came down just now." What floor was she on? The guard, a middle-aged man named Park who had seen plenty of things in this lobby over the years, answered carefully. "The 22nd floor, sir." "She's been there since," he checked the log. "She came in this morning at 7:40 and never signed out." "What was she doing up there?" "I don't know, sir. But she came down with a bag full of printed documents about 2 hours ago and went back up." Min-Jae looked at him. "She was the one who submitted the amended presentation report," Park added. At 11:43, it came through the shared system with her login. Something moved through Min-Jae's expression that the guard couldn't name. Not surprise exactly. More like recognition, the feeling of a theory being confirmed. For the past 3 weeks, Min-Jae had been reading reports that didn't have anyone's name on them. Not technically. They appeared in the shared research folder under a generic intern access account, dense and precise and unlike anything his senior analysts produced, not because they were flashier, but because they were honest. They didn't tell him what the numbers could be made to say. They told him what the numbers meant. There was a difference, and most people who worked for him had forgotten it. He had told Director Choi to find out who was writing them. Choi had come back with a name. Ada Okoye. Nigerian. Graduate student. Intern, 4th month. Min-Jae had looked at the name for a long time. Now he picked up his keys and walked out into the rain. She was half a block away, walking fast, her head down, the rain already soaking through the shoulders of her coat. She hadn't heard his car. She hadn't heard him pull up alongside her. She startled so hard when he rolled down the window that she nearly tripped. "Ada Okoye," he said. She turned. Stared. The rain plastered her hair to her face. She blinked at him with an expression he would think about later, not fear exactly, not awe exactly, but a very controlled version of someone trying very hard not to look as surprised as they were. "Mr. Lee," she said. "Get in." Her chin lifted slightly. "I'm fine. Thank you." "Your phone is dead," he said. "The last subway stopped running." The nearest taxi stand is 4 kilometers in the wrong direction. He looked at her. Get in. A pause. The rain came down between them. She got in. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The car was warm and smelled of cedar and something she couldn't identify. Classical music played so softly it was almost below hearing. Ada sat very straight, her wet coat dripping onto the seat, and stared through the windshield. He drove without speaking for 2 full minutes. You corrected the presentation, he said finally. There were errors. You could have sent an email. It was 11 o'clock, she said. There was no one to send it to. Another silence. You cross-referenced West African GDP data with 6 different sources, he said, including 2 academic papers that weren't in our research database. She looked at him sideways. You read it. I read everything. She turned back to the windshield. Outside, Seoul moved past them in streaks of neon and rain, the Han River gleaming in the distance, the city vast and indifferent and beautiful in the way that things are beautiful when they are completely unconcerned with you. Why did you stay? He asked. You're an intern. That report wasn't your responsibility. She was quiet for a moment. Because I knew how to fix it, she said. And knowing how to fix something and choosing not to fix it, she paused. That's a choice I can't live with. He didn't respond, but she saw his jaw tighten. Not in anger. In something else. The African market projections in the original deck were wrong, she said, because now that she had started, she found she couldn't stop. Not the numbers. The assumptions. Whoever built that model was thinking about Africa the way people thought about it 10 years ago, unstable, high risk, long payoff. But there are 14 cities on the African continent right now where the mobile payment infrastructure is more advanced than anything in Europe. There are 20 million young consumers in Nigeria alone who have never banked with a physical institution but make 3 to 5 transactions a week on their phones. She caught herself. I'm sorry. You didn't ask for a presentation. No, he said. Keep going. She looked at him. His eyes were on the road. His expression was unreadable. But he had said keep going, and Ada Okoye did not need to be told twice. She talked for 14 minutes. She talked about Lagos and Nairobi and Accra. She talked about the infrastructure gaps that were actually opportunities in disguise. She talked about trust, how business in West Africa ran on relationships and reputation in ways that Western corporate models kept trying to bypass and kept failing because of it. She talked about her father, who ran a shipping logistics company in Enugu, who had been trying for 11 years to get a reliable Korean tech partner and kept hitting walls made of assumptions about what African businesses could handle. Min-Jae said nothing. He did not interrupt her once. When she finally stopped, he pulled up outside her apartment building. She hadn't told him the address, which meant he'd looked it up, which should have unsettled her but somehow didn't. How long have you been working on this? He asked. Since I got here, she said. For months. Alone. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. I canceled a $1 million meeting tonight. She blinked. I didn't know about the meeting. I'm sorry, did I? You fixed my presentation, he said. Which is why I had a reason to look at the security feed. Which is why I saw you leaving. He paused. The meeting was already in trouble. The data you corrected was the backbone of the entire pitch. He looked at her directly for the first time since she'd gotten in the car. You didn't just fix a mistake. You saved the deal from being made on a false premise. She stared at him. Come to the boardroom tomorrow, he said. Bring your materials. Mr. Lee, I'm an intern. The board won't. I'm the CEO. His voice was quiet, the way it always was. The board will. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Don't go anywhere. Hit the like button if you're feeling this story, and drop a comment, Team Ada or Team Min-Jae. Let me know below. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. She didn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table until 4 in the morning with her laptop and 3 cups of tea and every research file she'd been quietly building for months, and she organized them into the clearest, most unassailable case she had ever made for anything. She thought about calling her mother. She didn't. It was too late, and her mother would worry. But she thought about her father, about all the times he'd sat at his own kitchen table with his own stacks of papers, trying to build bridges that kept not getting built. And she felt something shift in her chest that wasn't quite hope and wasn't quite fear, but was somewhere between them, which is exactly where the important things live. At 3:45, her roommate Yemi, another Nigerian student, studying medicine, shuffled into the kitchen in her pajamas, took one look at Ada's face, and said, "What happened?" Ada told her. Everything. The presentation. The rain. The CEO's car. Yemi was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Ada, he canceled $1 million meeting." "I know. For you." "For the report," Ada said. "He said the meeting would have failed." Yemi gave her a look that contained about 11 unspoken sentences. "Go to sleep," she said finally. "But Ada, go to that boardroom and make them understand what you know. Don't shrink." "I'm not going to shrink." "I know," Yemi said. "I'm reminding you in case the nerves try to make you." Ada looked at her for a moment. Then she turned back to her laptop. "I'll sleep for 2 hours," she said. She slept for 1. The boardroom the next morning was already tense when she walked in. Director Choi looked at her like she was a caterer who had come to the wrong floor. 2 of the investors from the night before were on a call in the corner. Chairman Beck was standing by the window with his arms folded, a man whose time was worth money and who was very aware that his time was currently being spent waiting. Min-Jae was at the head of the table. "Gentlemen," he said, "this is Ada Okoye. She rebuilt our market strategy from the ground up while the rest of us were at dinner." He looked at her. "Ada." She stood. Her hands were completely steady. She had learned a long time ago to let nerves live in her body without letting them reach her voice. "The original presentation," she said, "was built on an assumption that African markets are emerging. I'd like to argue that they've already emerged, and that the companies not currently positioned there are not avoiding risk, they are creating it." The silence in the room was different from the silence of the night before. This one was paying attention. She talked for 22 minutes. At the 8-minute mark, Chairman Beck unfolded his arms. At the 14-minute mark, he pulled out a notepad. At 19 minutes, one of the investors on the call hung up and turned to face her directly. When she finished, nobody moved. Then Chairman Beck said, "What would a full African expansion project require in terms of timeline and initial capital?" Ada looked at him. She had the answer. She had prepared for this question at 3 in the morning with her 3rd cup of tea. She told him. The room broke open into conversation. Not the polished, guarded conversation of men finalizing a deal, the urgent, overlapping conversation of people who had just seen something they hadn't expected to see and couldn't stop talking about it. Min-Jae sat at the head of the table and said nothing. He watched Ada hold the room and thought about the word that kept presenting itself, unhelpful and persistent, inevitable. As though this had always been where it was going. As though the rain and the security camera and the split-second decision to leave the $1 million meeting had been less of a choice and more of a recognition. That night, the investors didn't sign the original deal. They proposed a new one. 3-year partnership. African market development. Scope and budget 4 times larger than the original contract. Months passed the way months do when the work is real fast and slow at once, full of small frustrations and sudden breakthroughs and the slow accumulation of something being built. Ada became head of African market development. She flew to Lagos and Nairobi and Accra on behalf of Shintech, and she sat across tables from people who had been waiting for exactly this kind of conversation, and she built things. Real things. Partnerships with mobile payment platforms. Distribution agreements with 3 of the fastest-growing logistics companies in West Africa. A pilot program in Nigeria that her father, reading about it in the newspaper, called her to discuss at length with a voice that kept catching in ways he didn't acknowledge. She did not always agree with Min-Jae. There were meetings where they sat on opposite sides of a table and argued with the focused intensity of 2 people who respected each other too much to be anything less than honest. He pushed back on her timelines. She pushed back on his risk assessments. There was one meeting in March that the rest of the staff would whisper about for months. Ada had proposed an accelerated rollout in 3 West African cities simultaneously. Min-Jae said it was too fast. Ada said waiting was its own kind of risk. Min-Jae said the infrastructure wasn't ready. Ada put a tablet in front of him with live data from her contacts in Lagos and said, "Tell me what you see." He looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at her. 6 months, he said. Not 3. She said, 4. He said, 5. She said, deal. Director Choi, who had been taking notes, realized he had written the word deal 3 times and had been holding his breath for approximately 4 minutes. The board, watching this unfold over weeks and months, could not quite figure out what to make of it. The quiet, formidable CEO and the young Nigerian woman who was somehow the only person in the building he argued with, which was also somehow the only person he listened to. The expansion launch celebration was held in Shinteka's main conference space, not the boardroom, but the big atrium with the glass ceiling, because Ada had asked for a space where the light came in and Min-Jae had approved it without comment. There was music. There were speeches. Director Choi gave an excellent speech about vision and courage that made no mention of the fact that he had tried to stop Ada from entering the boardroom 9 months ago, which everyone noticed and no one mentioned. Min-Jae did not give a speech. He stood at the edge of the room with a glass of water he never drank at company events and watched the room that Ada had, in many ways, made possible. She found him there at the end of the evening, when the speeches were done and the crowd had thinned to small clusters of people who didn't want the night to end. "You should have given a speech," she told him. "You gave a better one." She laughed, a real laugh, not a professional one. He had noticed, over the months, that she had 2 kinds of laughs. He had counted it as a small victory the first time he'd earned the real one. "I keep thinking about that night," she said. She wasn't looking at him, she was looking at the room, at the maps on the wall showing the expansion routes, at the photographs of the Lagos partnership signing where she was grinning, so wide her face could barely contain it. "You canceled a $1 million meeting." "The meeting was going to fail," he said. "You didn't know that yet." A pause. "No," he agreed. "I didn't." She looked at him then. He was looking back, which he didn't always do. Min-Jae Lee had a way of looking at rooms, at problems, at the middle distance, that kept people slightly off balance. But he was looking at her directly, the way he did in the boardroom when they were arguing, the way he had in the car that rainy night when he'd said, "Keep going." "Why did you really come after me?" she asked. That night, he considered the question with the seriousness he gave every question. "Because," he said finally, "I had been reading your work for 3 weeks, and I wanted to know who you were. And you were walking alone in the rain, and he stopped. Started again. I did not want you to stop walking towards something because of one bad night." Ada looked at him for a long moment. Outside the glass ceiling, Seoul hummed and glittered, enormous and indifferent and beautiful. "That night changed everything," he said quietly. "For the company." "For the company," she agreed, and there was something in her voice, a question that wasn't quite a question, that hung between them like the rain had hung between them that first night, waiting to be answered. He didn't answer it. Not yet. They stood there together in the warmth of what they'd built, and the city moved around them, and the story that had begun in the rain was still going, just entering its next chapter. Because the night he canceled a $1 million deal was only the beginning. And the best stories, Ada knew, her father had taught her this, always take longer than you expect to arrive at the place they were always heading. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, subscribe so you never miss the next one, and drop a comment below. What would you have done in Ada's position that night? Would you have stayed to fix the report or let it go? Tell me below. See you in the next one.